I'm getting a lot of correspondence. I suspected I would because I knew I wanted to talk about RFK Jr.'s statement that he thinks we're going to get the answers on autism, what environmental factors cause autism. Here's a little bit of him yesterday, 1566, if you would, please, Paulie.
And within 3 weeks, and probably we're hoping in 2 weeks, we're going to announce a series of new studies to identify precisely what the environmental toxins are that are causing it. This has not been done before. And we're going to do it in a thorough and comprehensive way, and we're going to get back to with an answer to the American people very, very quickly.
Now, I got another post. I should share with you a couple of notes I received this morning from the audience. And one woman suggested that, and I was explaining this a little bit to Eddie during the break, I do understand what she's trying to say. If it is found, if RFK Jr. finds, if these studies conclude, if there's information that suggests we've been doing something to children inadvertently, not on purpose, but inadvertently, we've been doing something for our children that ultimately ended up being to our children, right? There's a difference. We're doing it for the kids versus to the kids. There's a difference. Most normal people don't want to hurt children in any way. You want to help. And she said, I think there are too many people who couldn't bear the thought that anything they did for their children could actually maybe have been something that they did to them if this study is released. And this comes from my rhetorical question, why are people so vicious about RFK Jr. talking about this? Peggy said, Chris, your autism question. I just spoke with a best friend with twin autistic boys. She doesn't want to hear about RFK Jr. She doesn't want to talk about vaccines at all. If there's anything about that means it's her fault, she just can't bear the thought. So Peggy confirmed that. Look, I'm not prepared to say I know anything about any of this. Dr. Michael Schwartz is a best-selling author of Fauci's fiction. He has written a number of very important things and talked us through COVID and ultimately that shot that we know not only didn't work but has caused harm, and I think reinvigorated the conversation about what we're injecting in our systems, fairly or unfairly, scientifically or not. Not here to comment on that, but Dr. Schwartz, I welcome you back.
To see you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
This is sensitive. It's personal. No one wants to hurt children. No one wants to think anything they've done would hurt their children. But am I right? Are the listeners right when they write me and say, this is making people mad that RFK Jr. talks this way because it might be too close to home? What's the psychology of this?
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind. I mean, a lot of people, even with COVID, we see confirmation biases. It's even people on the right. A lot of people will pick something they've heard and stick to that, and then they base their entire narrative on that. Why wouldn't we want to know, right, Chris? I mean, education is key. I think, if there was an environmental trigger and it has to do something with these shots, let's call it that, because that's part of the problem. People aren't educated on vaccines. When they talk about vaccines, they lump them all together, not realizing there's different technology. We're comparing an mRNA COVID shot, right, to a live attenuated polio shot. That's two different types of technology. What if it's the technology? What if it's subunit? What if it's viral vector? What if it's mRNA? That's the conversation we're not having, and that's the conversation we need to have. People aren't educated on this issue, and if RFK Jr. uncovers something that has to do with either the timing of these shots being given to kids, I think we give 12 shots to kids before the time they could even speak. So how do we know if they're having an allergic reaction? I mean, we're looking for signs, we're looking for symptoms, but the kids can't tell us at that point if they're having some kind of an allergic reaction that we can't notice. Symptoms aren't just always observable. Sometimes they're reportable. We discovered that during COVID as well, because a lot of people would think that they were going to have shortness of breath, a cough, a fever with COVID. Well, meanwhile, the most common symptom with COVID was a headache. How does a kid tell you that they've got a major headache, obviously outside of crying, if they're getting a reaction from a shot? So there's a lot to uncover here. There's a lot to unpack, but we've really got to dial down in the specifics of the technology to really understand it as a whole.
It is, again, the reason it's so fraught is because it's emotional. You have people that are raising children with various struggles, perhaps, And if studies now conclude that those struggles could have been avoided had we known something new that we just discovered, I would imagine, I'm just imagining, the psychology of that as a parent is probably frustrating, terrifying, maddening. It makes you feel guilt. Oh, if only I'd known this. Maybe it's too much, I think, for people to bear that something external caused what they're dealing with today. It's too much to bear.
Sure, but
I think, for some.
Is that an excuse, though, to negate the rest of humanity moving forward, trying to figure this out? I mean, is that an excuse to say, okay, well, I have a confirmation bias, or I have some cognitive distortion? I mean, that you see that with COVID now. You see people who have had reactions from the COVID shots and say, well, if I had only known. We were trying with, like I said, with bated breath, trying to get all this information out to the public, which was censored. Why do you think a lot of this might be censored now? You have Big Pharma that comes into play. They've spent a lot of money. They've got a huge lobby. If they've been trying to cover up something that maybe we've known, and when you talk to a lot of professionals, most professionals will tell you they think it has to do with these shots. You go back to 2020. Let's go back even further to the 1970s and 80s. You saw an instance of between 1 and 2,000 to 1 in 5,000 kids with autism. Back to 2020, it was 1 in 150. With today's study, with the 2025 CDC numbers, it's 1 in 31. And that's up from 1 in 36 just 4 years ago. So this is increasing. And RFK says that, look, hey, people are going to say, well, we're coming out with new methods to detect. We're looking for this more. We've expanded the scope of diagnostics. But RFK says that only accounts for about 25% of the cases. You cannot go from 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 31 in just a couple decades and not look at something that we're doing environmentally, giving shots, and say, wait a minute, there's got to be a correlation. I understand there might be an emotional concern that a parent might have done something to a kid, but that is not an excuse to just, ignore moving forward for kids in the future. If we can find the reason, we can find the cause and correlation, let's attack it and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was very emotional, and we were compelled to do many things because of emotion and fear and panic, and it turned out to be terribly wrong, I would remind everyone. But let's stay here for a minute, Doctor. Dr. Michael Schwartz, again, his latest release, The Only Way to Save America, Trump 2.0, The Battle for Common Sense, the most recent read from Dr. Michael Schwartz. Let's be clear. On childhood vaccines, on measles and mumps and kind of those standard things that kids have been getting since I was a baby, where does Dr. Schwartz stand on them today? What do you tell people?
I tell them it comes down to technology. People ask me about this all the time, and this is the problem. We are, again, lumping all of this together into one thing. We're not educating people enough on the difference in technology. When you look at MMR, it's a live attenuated shot, much like the polio shot. Not to say there aren't any issues with those particular shots. There are, but not in the abundance you see with something like mRNA. So if people understood the technology, a subunit, viral vector, mRNA, MMR, and you understood it in totality, you'd be speaking more clearly, because right now we're comparing apples to oranges. I always say, Chris, all the time, if you come out with an MMR vaccine that's mRNA-based technology, I would steer clear away from it, because we know now that that's not ready for prime time and causing issues. So it comes down to how they're made, specifically what type of technology. If it's live attenuated right now, I don't have a major issue, but I do have an issue with the abundancy, the amount of shots that we give these kids all at one time. I think they need to be spaced out. There's certain ones I don't have issues with, and there's certain ones I do have issues with that you just don't really need.
So when you have a baby, an infant, a toddler, and they're on this shot schedule, you would counsel people to ask their doctor what? Again, I know you just said it, but I think it's important. Maybe people just need the verbiage to direct to their medical professional. What should they ask?
What type of technology is this shot based on? People keep saying the word vaccine. That terminology was changed slightly during COVID. When you look at the COVID shot, it never gave long-term immunity or inoculation. MMR wasn't designed to do that. It doesn't go after the whole of the virus. It goes after the spike protein. There's 27 proteins inside the whole of COVID. These shots weren't designed to do that. So when you come out with a different type of technology, if you're giving a flu shot that's mRNA, steer clear. Look, I've never had a flu shot to begin with, we can disprove the thing that they say it's 30% efficacy. It's never been put up against a placebo study, so we can disprove that already. But it's important to understand the type of technology that these shots are being made with. MMR, I'm not happy with. When you go back to the live attenuated, that's the older technology that's been proven to work pretty well. Now that we've been using subunit, we've been using viral vector technology, and we've been using mRNA technology, the science isn't quite clear, but we saw that in abundance with mRNA, with COVID, that those shots caused major issues, and of course, I never gave any inoculation to COVID.
When you say live attenuated, is that something that doctors know? I mean, in other words, can I say, hey, before I take this shot, is it live attenuated or not? Like the doctor should know what they're shooting in me.
Depends on the doctor. You know, I have an immunologist that I talk to about this all the time, so we learn every single day. When you talk to a general practitioner, the training they get on these things is kind of, I want to say basic. You know, a good doctor, a lot of these good doctors, especially pediatricians, usually know because they're giving these in abundance, but then you have to offset that with the financial, aspect of the insurance companies kind of forcing these shots on a certain time schedule, and people know about that. This isn't a secret.
No.
Doctors actually do get paid more to give these shots at a certain time frame. So there's a lot of questions here. We could unpack a can of worms and go for hours.
Just a couple of seconds, Dr. Schwartz. Do you think RFK Jr. has the goods? He says September. He's going to know what causes autism. You believe him?
When you look at I think most people think that there's a correlation with the timing and abundance of these shots, and I think it hasn't been a secret, but that's been suppressed by big pharma. So I think RFK, as much as I disagree with him on certain political issues, he has the goods when it comes to this. The work he's done, the years and the team he surrounds himself with, you probably couldn't have found a better person.
The great Dr. Michael Schwartz, The Only Way to Save America, Trump 2.0, The Battle for Common Sense. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your time.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.